Hello and welcome to Philosophy Roulette number 208. This is Philosophy Roulette number 208, where I read and review philosophy papers live online for the viewing public. I had a request recently, so I think I'm going to be doing that. So instead of searching around, I'm already just going to jump into this paper by Nancy Tua, Embedding Philosophers in the Practice of Science, Bringing Humanities to the Sciences. If you want to grab the paper, the link to this Phil Papers page will be in the show notes. Also, as always, you can grab it if you're in the chat by typing !paper. And I mean, you can just grab it, a copy for yourself on Scholar. It's right there. If you hit, there's a link right to it, right there. So you can grab the paper, and let me just set up the last little bit of the stream, and then we'll be off. So this was, like I said, a request. I hope viewer sees it. Don't think no one's watching yet. I just started the stream. Hopefully some people will jump in. And if you join me live, please feel free to ask questions as we go. I mean, it's my first time reading it too. So this is Embedding Philosophers in the Practices of Science, Bringing Humanities to the Sciences by Nancy Tua in Synthese from 2013. So, here we go. Interdisciplinarity has been variously defined in this century as a methodology, a concept, a process, a way of thinking, a philosophy, a reflexive ideology. It has been linked with attempts to expose the dangers of fragmentation, to reestablish old connections, to explore emerging relations, and to create new subjects adequate to handle our practical and conceptual needs. Cutting across all these theories is one recurring idea. Interdisciplinarity is a means of solving problems and answering questions that cannot be satisfactorily addressed using single methods or approaches. Wow, sure. The value and critical importance of interdisciplinarity in the sciences is widely accepted and supported by the U.S. National Science Foundation, the NSF. The NSF, like funding agencies in other countries, not only provides funding for interdisciplinarity research in the sciences, but it also made large investments in interdisciplinarity education through its Integrative Graduate Education and Research Traineeship IGERT program. That is like the ugliest acronym, IGERT. The NSF justifies this expenditure by explaining that the ability to conduct interdisciplinarity research is necessary to maintain U.S. competitiveness in high-value industries and has important economic and social benefits through inventions and innovation that deliver new products and services or improve the effectiveness and efficiency of existing processes. This assessment of the importance of interdisciplinarity is shared by the National Institutes of Health, NIH. According to the NIH, the scope and complexity of biomedical research programs demand that scientists move beyond the confines of their individual disciplines and explore new organizational models for team science. All right, so these are like giant organizations in the United States. For anyone who's not in the United States and don't know what the U.S. National Science Foundation is, or the National Institutes of Health. Okay. The NSF, as a federal agency tasked with promoting the progress of science, provides a clear snapshot of the current perception of interdisciplinarity research in the sciences and how it is valued. The NSF website hosts an interdisciplinarity research webpage, which provides an introductory explanation of the importance of interdisciplinarity research from the perspective of the NSF, a definition of interdisciplinarity research, and a list of sources of funding support. The National Science Foundation offers two justifications for their support of interdisciplinarity research and educational programs. The first justification is based on the fact that important research topics often transcend the scope of a single discipline, and thus interdisciplinary research is valuable in pushing fields forward and accelerating scientific discovery. They underscore this insight by explaining that the content of scientific knowledge as well as research methods are in flux both within and between disciplines. The NSF views interdisciplinarity research as an essential source for addressing such emerging problems. The second justification concerns interdisciplinarity training which the NSF claims is important workforce training that will best prepare scientists and engineers to undertake challenges in innovative ways. According to the National Science Foundation workshop report, Impact on Academic Institutions of Transformative Interdisciplinarity Research and Graduate Education, the ability to conduct interdisciplinarity research is necessary to maintain U.S. competitiveness in high-value industries and has important economic and societal benefits through inventions and innovations that deliver new products and services or improve the effectiveness and efficiency of existing processes. Also, of course, very important to note, if you have to have lots and lots of fancy titles and acronyms if you're going to do stuff like this. So, yeah, so I wonder where this paper is going. I didn't read the abstract. Okay, so, in this essay, I argue that the NSF appreciation of interdisciplinarity is insufficiently robust in that it, for the most part, fails to fully appreciate the value of the humanities in general and philosophy in particular as a crucial partner in interdisciplinary research in the sciences. My goal is to advance a proposal for developing deeper and wider interdisciplinary research in the sciences through what I label coupled ethical epistemological research. Coupled ethical epistemic issues arise in science in a variety of ways. There are often, for example, value decisions embedded in research models and methods that go unquestioned and often unappreciated. These can be both ethically significant as well as have consequences for what is and is not known. Thus, rendering these values transparent and examining their coupled ethical epistemic significance is an important and often underappreciated resource for more objective science. In the sections to follow, I argue that this more robust model of interdisciplinary practice that is founded on coupled ethical epistemological research will result in better science, both in the traditional science of advancing knowledge by building on and adding to our current knowledge, as well as in the broader sense of science for the good of, that is scientific research that satisfies the goals of the NSF broader impact criterion for the benefiting society. Now, here's the question. All these titles, and I'm sure these people are all like really great people that are running this stuff, but this is still the United States of America, and this is a paper from 2013. Maybe they were more idealistic way back 7 years ago, but frankly, the way things have gone is that they're not as idealistic. They're just like a lot of universities are going to just like cut the humanities, and so the idea that we have to justify the humanities on the ways that other people are setting us up for like this is what's valuable. It doesn't look like that. Like it has not. I'm sure I completely agree with everything this person's gonna say, but the way that history has played out in the last like few years, you can't play by their game because they just keep moving the goalposts farther and farther away. They just want to make more and more money. That's why they just like, so it's going more and more towards just like serving business needs. And so the idea that we're going to couple ethics and epistemics with the sciences, I'm sure great for science, but I think the people in charge have just been playing lip service to that stuff. And so it's very hard to make it, even if you're arguing along these lines, I don't know if that's actually going to convince anyone, because they're not going to move any farther towards the doing the right thing for science. They're going to do the right thing for science insofar as it makes them money and pays for itself, that they don't have, or not pays for itself, but in some sense, it provides the science that they want it to provide, which this is not. Science for itself is not the science people want it to provide. So, let's see where we're going with this, though. But I mean, it's a very hard conversation at the moment about what the value of philosophy is if you're trying to satisfy other people who don't value philosophy. It's like it's a losing battle in some sense, because they don't want to learn. Okay, the world has problems. Universities have disciplines. Disciples? Disciplines. While valuing interdisciplinary research on the one hand, there is on the other hand recognition by both the NSF and in the literature on interdisciplinary research of the challenges and barriers to it. These are typically grouped into three broad areas, namely 1. Institutional barriers, 2. Disciplinary barriers, and 3. Epistemic barriers, though it is often acknowledged that the boundaries between these are porous. And I mean, if you're going to talk about porous boundaries, you're missing a parenthesis right here. Institutional obstacles in the academic setting include such elements as the structure of educational programs and incentive systems. Here we go. So this is what I was talking about. Incentive systems. What does that mean? Since it is commonly agreed that interdisciplinary research must be combined with disciplinary training, interdisciplinary training for graduate students often requires additional classes, more time to completion of the program, and are faced with different challenges than they are in their disciplinary training. Even in the Integrative Graduate Education and Research Traineeship (IGRT) program and dual title programs where graduate students are provided mentorship for conducting interdisciplinary research, years to completion of their degree are often longer, resulting in additional funding issues, for in at least some cases there is not sufficient funding to cover extra years of study. In addition, students are more likely than in traditional programs to feel overwhelmed by the additional work or different expectations and requirements requirements of their interdisciplinary training. In reflection by a group of IGRT students regarding their educational experiences, they call attention, for example, to having confronted difficult issues including time limitations, individual and team learning styles, and the iterative process of identity formation. These students list the following issues they confronted while participating in the IGRT process. How can I, or do I want to, relate to my interdisciplinary and disciplinary work? To what extent does interdisciplinary research help me complete degree requirements? What are the implications of integrating my disciplinary and interdisciplinary research? Will I attain the rigor and depth necessary in my disciplinary research given the interdisciplinary contribution to my degree? How much research must I do to obtain legitimacy in my discipline and in urban ecology, the interdisciplinary theme of IGRT? How do I demonstrate disciplinary fluency, proficiency, and interdisciplinary agility? Yeah, this is basically the problem. If you're going to spend all your time researching two things, if you're going to split your time researching two things, you're never going to be fully as competent as someone who spent all that time researching the one thing. And then what happens is you're not good enough. You don't look like your work doesn't look good enough to either group of people because it's only sort of like part way there. And so people who are spent all their time on one thing will evaluate that work along those lines, and therefore when they look at sort of interdisciplinary stuff by someone who's just coming up, it won't look as competent to any expert in that field because the expert won't be interdisciplinary themselves. So we've got a evaluative problem, which is really what it's coming to here. It's one of these, like it's a institutional like structure problem here. Yeah. So, faculty face various institutional challenges. The organization of the tenure and promotion process in the United States is a key element since rank is one important marker of success, and in the case of tenure stream assistant professors, developing a dossier that will support a tenure decision is required for retaining one's job. For instance, tenure promotion committees are typically disciplinary based and may not appreciate either the publication venues that are prestigious for interdisciplinary research or the challenges of such research, including the extra time it can take for an interdisciplinary project to produce outcomes. The ease of collaboration between faculty from different departments is often limited by the physical structure of universities, which faculty are often housed in separate buildings based on disciplinary lines, where research facilities are similarly spatially divided. In addition, there are often few opportunities within the academy for faculty themselves to receive or offer interdisciplinary training, and in many institutions there is typically little institutional support for interdisciplinary research or incentive systems to encourage such work. Yeah, so this is basically it. It's that the whole system has not been set up to be interdisciplinary. And so this may actually go back to the old model of like the solitary genius, which never actually was the case. No one was ever like a solitary genius. All the people who are like touted as great scientists of the past, they were all in massive collaboration with basically a whole bunch of other people all the time. And a lot of the people who are touted as like these great geniuses. Some of them, were full of crap. I mean, they weren't the what they are marketed as, or B, sometimes just, even if they're not full of crap, they're great. It's, again, science is and philosophy too, is quite often not just it's not a solo enterprise. So there's like sort of a historical problem going on here that is institutionally like structured, so you can't get out of it. Like the academy is this way, and God forbid you want to do any public philosophy. Like reading philosophy papers on Twitch. Disciplinary training and... Oh yeah, if anyone's out there watching and has questions, please let me know. I will try to answer them. But again, hey, I'm reading this the first time too. Disciplinary training and reward systems give rise to similar barriers. Which journals are considered top rank and how co-authorship is reviewed, even how authorship and... excuse me. Even how authorship ordered is treated are often disciplinary specific. Yeah. There are also disciplinary differences in publication or grant expectations, which can pose challenges both for conducting interdisciplinary research as well as for mentoring students interested in pursuing interdisciplinary training. Academic departments take care to ensure that key curriculum offerings do not conflict with one another. That is, graduate offerings are often scheduled at different times so students are free to choose between them. However, there are seldom efforts to coordinate curricular offerings with other departments or with interdisciplinary programs, leading to time conflicts for students interested in interdisciplinary training. Yeah, so you'd have to... It's a scheduling problem. So there's organizational logistics going on. This is actually an interesting problem with how people view authorship, because in like philosophy, sometimes the first author is bigger, but quite often everyone shares in the work unless they say one person did most of it or one person did less of it. A lot of times in philosophy, there's more solo articles, so it's not like the solitary genius in philosophy, but it is still a less collaborative enterprise quite often. So the fact that like if you have a group paper, sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. So but I know in other disciplines, it makes a very big difference if you're the first name. I don't know how. I mean, it might make a difference depending on what you're doing, but yeah. Okay, so epistemic barriers include dissimilar and sometimes conflicting styles of thought, methodology, research traditions, techniques, and terminology that can make interdisciplinary teaching, research, or collaboration challenging. Each discipline has a conception of what constitutes knowledge, as well as what are reliable avenues for producing valid knowledge claims. How such knowledge can be appropriately applied can vary across disciplines. While not denying the significance of institutional or disciplinary barriers, the epistemic differences between disciplines constitute not only a significant challenge to the success of interdisciplinary research, but, as I will argue in this essay, potential avenues to more successful interdisciplinary collaborations. Disciplinary epistemic practices, while themselves in process of being created and recreated through training and habituation, nonetheless can provide resources when put into dialogue for rethinking and recreating the connections between knowledge practices. Such dialogue has the potential to render transparent the epistemic assumptions of the discipline through interdisciplinary interactions and provides opportunities to rethink values and assumptions embedded in these practices. In other words, interdisciplinary collaborations provide possibilities for undisciplined practices. Undisciplined. Well, I'd say interdisciplinary practice. Well, interdisciplinary collaborations provide possibilities for... I don't know what that undisciplined practices mean. I guess it's what these folks said. But yeah, I guess it would be to sort of undo the burdens of your discipline. So. Okay. Interesting. So we'll see, because this is a problem. It's that the standards for like social sciences are slightly different between social sciences, between like quote unquote hard sciences. You're not doing things in the same way, and like you make progress in different ways. It's not to say something is easier in one area than the other. It's just that to make progress in certain areas requires different skills, different thoughts, different ways of doing your work. And so what works in like subject area A does not work in subject area B. And so if you're going to try to get these two people together, one person's going to be like, always going to be like, are you crazy? You can't do that here. That does not work. And vice versa. So, that's a part of the epistemology of science, is how knowledge is created in different ways in different areas, which is a very interesting problem. Breaching interdisciplinarity. One of the most typical omissions of or breaches of interdisciplinary practice in the sciences, particularly those supported by the NSF, is the underappreciation of humanities disciplines as significant interdisciplinary partners. While it might be argued that it is the role of the National Endowment for the Humanities to support humanities-related research, my argument is not that the NSF should support humanities projects, but rather that the humanities disciplines provide important resources for interdisciplinary research in science and engineering that should be part of the mission of the NSF. For the purposes of this essay, my focus will be on the practices of philosophy as a potentially highly valuable but currently underutilized partner in achieving the NSF's goal of pushing fields forward and accelerating scientific discovery. Now, what's interesting right here, and I think there's maybe a slight, the author could have just done this. Maybe they will say it too. This is just the next level up of the institutional barriers, the academic barriers that exist between different departments. This is just the next level up in terms of the United States federal government, and the their federal institutions are just reflections of the old standing barriers between historical disciplines. And why are they that way? Is that a good way to be? No, it's not. It's just historically that way because that's how it was set up for whatever reason back in the day. Might be fine, but this is, I think, everyone sort of agrees that it's not really working super awesome. So this history, the historical reason that the humanities, the National Endowment for the Humanities and the NSF are separate things, is just the next level up of this institutional historical divide that will need to be overcome. Okay. A clear snapshot of the underutilization of the humanities in general and the field of philosophy in particular, and the worry that when philosophical approaches are supported by the NSF, they are not actual interdisciplinary partners, can be obtained by considering recent NSF Integrative Graduate Education and Research Traineeship Program awards. The NSF webpage lists 168 such awards. Of these, only 4 involve the methods, resources, or knowledge practices of philosophy. And of these 4, 3 are focused on ethics education and are smaller grants, similar to the NSF Ethics Education in Science and Engineering grants designed to educate grad students about research ethics. 1. Integrating ethics education capacity building workshops for science and engineering faculty to build capacity for faculty to educate graduate students about research ethics in the context of the research environment. HPL-based ethics education for life sciences and bioengineering students, designed to prepare life sciences and bioengineering students to recognize and address ethical issues in their profession through the creation of case-based educational modules and related materials in life science ethics for use by graduate students, and emphasize themes that are, hey, synestemiotics, excellent choice of topic, thank you, I have no idea how I would have gotten on this, no idea, it's just, it's roulette, it's dumb luck. Through creation of case-based educational modules and related materials in life science ethics for use by graduate students, and to emphasize themes that are aligned to critical components of an effective ethical framework for the responsible conduct of research, RCR, as defined by HHS Office of Research Integrity, ORI. Ethics education for professional science master's programs, to create ethics education materials in the growing area of professional science master's education programs that enhance student awareness of important ethical issues and promote an understanding of ethics and integrity in scientific research outside of the academy. Yeah, see, I'm sure the author is going to say this immediately, but these are all these grants are clearly not in. They're going to say it's not interdisciplinary. You can see it right there. But basically, these are supporting the science. This is not working together. This is using this is applied philosophy, just taking some applied philosophy and okay, cool. This is taking applied philosophy and giving a grant to some applied philosophy in that, which is cool, that in the way that it is being applied to science and engineering. So that's good stuff, but it's not doing the philosophical research. It's doing the applied philosophy, which is also very good, but not, as they say, not in themselves interdisciplinary. All right, continuing. Although I would certainly underscore the value of ethics education and sciences, each of these grants, while aiming to integrate ethics into science education and provide science graduates with the skills needed to address ethical issues they might confront, are not themselves interdisciplinary. They apply resources from one discipline, in this case ethics, to topics in a science-based area to provide students training in case-based ethics education. Rather than becoming an integral component of an interdisciplinary approach to science in these fields, this model of ethics education risks becoming instead a handmaiden to the sciences, useful knowledge to have to ensure proper research conduct, but not a vehicle to better science. Ethics, while an important domain of philosophy, only comprises one area of philosophical study. Philosophical attention to epistemic practices is another domain in which interdisciplinary research could be richly augmented through philosophically directed attention to the assumptions and conceptual frameworks through which the validity of knowledge practices are established and the various sciences and methods are legitimated. However, another valuable path to integrating epistemic analyses into science practices and thereby enhancing interdisciplinary collaborations is through a truly integrated and interdisciplinary ethical analysis, one that I will argue can lead to coupled epistemic ethical analyses. Sine semiotic est. Isn't it significant that the degree granted in most doctorate are explicitly philosophers' degrees? No, that's an old practice. The reason it's PhD, it's like a doctor of philosophy of something, blah blah blah. It's just a technical term. It doesn't actually I don't think it actually has any significance nowadays. I mean, because a lot of things were philosophy, and like science was all natural philosophy back in the day, and that's like saying, well, is like you're gonna be a chemist now? Does that make you a philosopher? No, it makes you a chemist. But the term was from back in the day. You were a doctor of the philosophy of chemistry. Yeah. Well, it's specialization. It's not just because it isn't it all philosophy. No. I mean, how broadly do you want to define philosophy then? I mean, is all knowledge philosophy then? I don't think most people think that is. Well, philosophy is horizontal, but at some point you have to make a distinction between where philosophy ends and other stuff begins. I mean, if you want to go say like everything's philosophy, I mean, it's like go play sports, is that philosophy? If you're going to go be a chemist, is that philosophy? Well, you're studying the natural world, but like you still need to like just because it's called a doctor of philosophy, that doesn't mean there's very specialized stuff that really is outside the that is specialized to that discipline. I mean, you're going to say there is no other discipline besides philosophy, and that would be a little weird, because basically historically it's just not been the case. So it'd just be an unusual sort of claim that everything is all just the one topic. Since semiotics asks if the hard sciences forget their underpinnings of their entire franchise, they may not realize that philosophy was baked in all along. Well, that's entirely plausible. I mean, but people forget lots of stuff. they go wayward. They make mistakes. That's no big deal. That's pretty normal for people to not realize the problems. Now, the question is like, how are we going to what to do about it though? And it's like what you hear is basically is not with your two thumbs. The question then becomes like, what are you gonna do about it? And like people are gonna be like, why are you wasting my time? like with this philosophy stuff. Like, there's a lot of good work that needs to get done, and if I'm sitting around reading like some theory stuff, I'm not doing like work that needs to get done. And so a lot of times they're just like, well, look, I'm getting stuff there. Yeah, but again, like, everyone is like, well, an unwitting philosopher then too. So, I mean, when do you get to not be a philosopher then? Like, I don't know. I mean, can't I just go be a chemist? Make some like good drugs to like save people's lives? Does that make you a philosopher? Yeah, I mean, maybe in part, and you might know something about the philosophy of chemistry, so you're gonna be somewhat a philosopher, but like, you're gonna be mostly a chemist. So that's the question. So this is the thing here. I mean, the question is like, sure, the ethics is good, but it's like applied philosophy. They say that about the entire endeavor of philosophy. Eh, I mean, the question is, where do we, what exactly are we doing here? Like, yeah, we need to get philosophy back into other people's studies because it would be useful, and that's what this paper is addressing. But that doesn't mean they're not doing useful things other times too. Just that's it just it's a fact of life. Like, you can go build a house. Does that make you a philosopher? That seems a little weird if when you're building a house you're a philosopher. Yeah, sure. We're all philosophers to some degree. I mean, it is like ruthless essential definitions. Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like philosophy, like reflection and like conceptual analysis and all this stuff is something people do. And like, so everyone does some philosophy to begin with, to various degrees of success. Yeah, with varying degrees of talent, absolutely. But but yeah, it's like that doesn't make you a philosopher when you're like eating pie. Go eat pie. That doesn't make you a philosopher. Doesn't make you a good cook. All right, so continuing. Into the breach, the ethical dimensions of scientific research. While acknowledging the humanities in general and philosophy in particular stands as one gap or breach of interdisciplinary research in the sciences, a more robust appreciation that doesn't make it good philosophy, semiotics. Appreciation of the ethical dimensions of scientific research that is understood in typical research ethics analyses can be an important first step in bridging this gap or omission. However, doing so requires going significantly beyond typical approaches to research ethics and ultimately requires a more robust interdisciplinary approach to ethical analysis. Too often, research ethics in the sciences focuses on issues in the RCR. RCR topics include research misconduct, that is, issues of falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism, as well as responsible practice concerning authorship, conflict of interest, data management, animal welfare, and human subject protections. While these topics and the typical approach to train scientists in proper procedures are certainly important, this vision of research ethics is far too limited a venue to convey an appreciation of the full spectrum of ethics relevant to scientific research. Unfortunately, this approach to the relevance of ethics to science is being reinforced as universities, including my own, respond to the America Competes Acts, America Creating Opportunities to Meaningfully Provide Excellence in Technology, Education, and Science Act. This congressional directive requires that each institution that applies for financial assistance from the Foundation, the NSF, for science and engineering research or education describe in its grant proposal a plan to provide appropriate training and oversight in the responsible and ethical conduct of research to undergraduate students, graduate students, and postdoctoral research participating in the proposed research plan. In order for ethics to go once more into the breach, that is, to be a rallying cry for a more robust interdisciplinarity for the sciences that include the humanities as an essential element of interdisciplinarity, will require a far more inclusive understanding of the ethical dimensions of scientific research. I have elsewhere argued that this requires an appreciation of both the ethical issues external to the production of scientific research, as well as the ethical values that are embedded within the production of scientific knowledge. As a result of an NSF-funded research collaboration with geoscientists, our research team uncovered an approach to integrated ethical analyses into scientific practices that led to an interdisciplinary practice that was at the same time both broader and deeper. We labeled this enhanced conception the ethical dimensions of scientific reasoning. Interesting. I just want to comment here that, again, you might think, well, this is all like very good stuff right here. Like this seems like a great thing. Why not get some money in here? But again, as the author is pointing out, this is a rather limited view of how ethics can be used. I want to propose a further way of interpreting this. This purposely may keep out the further ethical considerations from being applied, because they don't want more ethics in their mucking up their science and their sort of production of whatever it is that they get out of the science and engineering, because philosophers tend to muck things up, and so they're more than happy to embrace and extend an olive branch to philosophers, as long as we stick to ethics in the way that it keeps everything running smoothly. But as soon as they get past that, then you get to the embrace, extend, and extinguish part of the old saying, where you embrace something, you extend it, and then you extinguish it, because that has given you control over it once you have embraced it and extended it. And that's kind of what this is. Amazon. Oh no, they already have Amazon Prime University. No. Google is way ahead of you. There's Google certificates that you can get. I don't know if they're still going, but there definitely was like a year or two ago. Google has like their own sort of certification things. So don't you worry. The smart people at Google already came up with that. Guilds like to keep themselves gilded. Oh yeah. That's a whole nother problem too. Who does the accreditation? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I haven't thought about the Google certification stuff. They were doing Google certified web development things or something. So you could go take some sort of Google certified course, and then you'd be that would be recognized by Google. So Google would recognize their own certificates, and then you could get hired by Google. If you took their little course, did well enough, then you could basically apply to Google even if you didn't have a proper degree. I'm not sure whatever came of that or if it's still going, but it was definitely it was a thing a little while ago. Okay. While responsible conduct of research, or RCR, or what we refer to as procedural components of scientific research, can often be understood by adding an ethical perspective to the sciences and engineering, the other dimensions often require richly interdisciplinary investigation to fully appreciate. Let me begin by providing a brief overview of the three dimensions. Yeah. Did the same with streetcars before you knew they existed, age 6. It happens. Good ideas float around. Just people have them. Dimension 1. Procedural ethics involves Procedural ethics involves ethical aspects of the process of conducting scientific research and is contained within the domain of RCR. So, we've got a picture. I like pictures. So, let's see if you can see it. Well, I'm glad providing content, maybe. Ethical dimension of scientific research. So we've got a busted a Venn diagram should only have 2, of course. Well, now you can take it and expand upon it. Procedural ethics, we've got this primarily the currently defined goals of the RCR, such as falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism, care for subjects, conflicts of interest, etc. All right. Extrinsic ethics. Ethical issues implying the outcomes of science to policy or assessing the impact of science and technology on society. This is the one I think people don't want to talk about, because they don't want to talk about the outcome of some engineering creating some terrible social problem. Okay. And then we've got intrinsic ethics, ethical issues that are internal to or embedded in the production of a given inquiry or mode of analysis. And this is the one that would, like, the philosophers probably would jump on. They want to talk about, like, cool issues, like, with the concepts already in there. Dude, I read so much of, like, this text. I mean, like, sometimes you get like a formula in logic. I'm like, hey, a logic formula, and then there's too much of it. I'm like, oh no. But, like, yeah, even not a real Venn diagram, but just sort of a kind of a 3-part Venn diagram is okay. So this is interesting. This intrinsic, like, this might be. If I had to guess, this is the like, if we're gonna go, like, this one is the okay one with current. This one here is where, like go next, I would think. Like, this is the second less bad one in terms of what the funding bodies would be worried about. They'd be like, oh, okay, we've got cool ideas that you can guys talk about in this, and it might help out with, like, this stuff up here. Like, they might be okay with this one here then. So, like, that one's okay. But then the problem of getting to go, like, this way from, like, over here to up here, not happening, I'm thinking. This is the one that I think is going to get the short end of the stick. Okay. This dimension of ethics includes investigation of the ways in which interest can pose a conflict to research objectivity, the relationship between trust and the interests of science, as well as aspects of data management. Unfortunately, most research programs for science and engineering are limited to this dimension of ethics. Yeah, that's this one up here, the procedural. Dimension 2, extrinsic ethics, involves the domain of ethical issues that are external to the production of scientific research, such as the applications of scientific findings to policy, to the impact of scientific discoveries on science, as well as the impact of societal interests on society. You were instructed to give me shit, and that's as mean as I'm comfortable getting. Fascist. Oh, is who was that? Is that Sirkian spreading her love, just telling people to give me shit? So nice of Sirkian. Ethical issues arise in the extrinsic dimension when, for example, considering the impact of scientific research on society. These arise in a variety of venues as the effect of technological innovations on social ends such as health and well-being, and the role of science in policy making. And nowadays we have social media destroying our society by just, like, feeding us garbage news all the time, which is lovely. And people don't want to fix that because it makes people in power a lot of money. This domain of ethics also includes ethical concerns arising from the impact of society on science. For example, the impact of funding on research trajectories on the ways in which widespread societal biases can impact research trajectories, as they arguably did with eugenics research. It also includes such topics as the proper interpretation and application of the precautionary principle, furthering epistemically and ethically adequate societal understandings of issues of scientific uncertainty and risk, the role of scientists in the development of policy-relevant research, and the ethical responsibility of scientists whose research reveals risks, for example, to human health or ecosystem sustainability. Yeah. The order was never reprimanded. Well, I'm tough. I'm a Twitch streamer. I have to deal with trolls constantly, somehow, maybe. Yeah. Don't worry. I know how to ban people now. You can get a ban. Dimension 3. You're not getting a ban, don't worry. Dimension 3. Intrinsic ethics, involved in those ethical concerns and values that are embedded in otherwise internal to the production of scientific research and analysis. This dimension involves ethical issues arising from, for example, the choice of certain equations, constants, and variables, the analysis of data, the handling of error, and the degree of confidence in projections. This domain of ethics often involves clarifying the presence of, reasons for, and implications of overconfidence or bias in scientific models. It also involves the identification of values and assumptions that are embedded in the very context of hypothesis development, data gathering and analysis, governing equations, models, strategies for addressing uncertainty, and the like. Don't forget that right here is all the social media and is a way of fixing things if slowly through meme generation. Oh yeah, we can definitely save the world if we only could come up with the right memes and the right emotes. Like if I ever get like Twitch affiliate and I can like have like multiple emotes, that'll definitely save the world. It's like, yeah. Let's see, is my emote picker gonna pop up? Yeah, I can like scroll through my emotes on screen. Oh yeah, and of course we also have Corona, which is also may save the world in its own way. Who knows? It is in the second and third dimensions and their frequent intersections that epistemic issues are often coupled with ethical issues. Disciplinary epistemic practices often embed values and assumptions that can be brought to light and re-examined through coupled epistemic ethical analyses. This has the potential to bring to light new insights for rethinking scientific assumptions and knowledge practices. It is in these domains that wider and deeper couplings between scientists and philosophers can lead to undisciplining practices which provide resources for new knowledges and new knowledge practices. While philosophical analysis of issues of research ethics, what we have labeled procedural ethics, is important, limiting research to this dimension of ethics overlooks many of the complex ethical issues facing scientists. This paper is a call for a broader and deeper interdisciplinary approach in the sciences that includes a focus on coupled ethical epistemological analyses. This important task will be best accomplished through inclusions. You meant memes in the Richard Dawkins sense? Well, that is kind of what emotes and memes and that stuff are, in some sense. I mean, philosophy could be thought of as a meme. Like, what's the greatest philosophical meme? I think, therefore I am. Thank you, Descartes. And then all sorts of other stuff. But yeah. And, okay, let me finish up this paragraph, and then I'll make more comment. This important task will best be accomplished through inclusion of philosophers who specifically train to help identify and analyze coupled ethical epistemological issues on scientific teams. While there are many domains of scientific research, and arguably perhaps every domain of scientific research that would benefit from a strengthened interdisciplinary practices that include this coupled ethical epistemological focus, one in which it is essential is research in the area of the science of anthropogenic climate change. Okay, so now we're going to get to the climate change issue. Interesting. Yeah, well, the question is who's making the memes? Like, if we've got giant troll factories at the moment, because this is basically the cheapest way that, like, people can affect a large amount of, like, say some bad actor wants to affect a large amount of, like, idiot Americans. Well, you get like a great comic meme that gets stuck in everyone's head, and you think that one candidate is terrible because you see the meme, you laugh at it, you think about it, it gets stuck in your head. And so the question is this slowly fixing the world through meme generation, or are we slowly rotting our mind because meme generation is the lowest common denominator at the moment, and it's killing us? So yes, all philosophers are we. That's right, we're getting back to that. But yes, so I think that is what we should learn, that troll factories are the greatest philosophers alive. And that's the deep thought for the day. Deeper and wider interdisciplinary research in the area of sciences through coupled ethical epistemological research. The NSF and other funding agencies have already recognized the centrality of interdisciplinary research in the field of climate change science. Alongside more disciplinary research opportunities, the NSF has established various funds to encourage deeply interdisciplinary research into coupled natural and human systems. To pick just one example, the NSF recently partnered with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Department of Energy to combine resources to provide Oh, there was a latex formatting error. Up to $50 million in 2010 to fund proposals through its cross-cutting initiative, decadal and regional climate prediction using Earth systems modeling. This program was established in recognition of the scientific impacts climate variability and change can have in relatively short time periods on precipitation, sea level rise, and ocean currents, and how these changes in turn can lead to loss of agricultural and forest productivity and stresses on both natural and managed ecosystems. These three agencies partnered to support research that would assist in both understanding the nature of these impacts and proactively planning for their consequences by encouraging the advancement of models that include coupled and interactive representations of ecosystems, agricultural working lands and forests, urban environments, biogeochemistry, atmospheric chemistry, ocean and atmospheric currents, the water cycle, land ice, and human activities. The decadal and regional climate prediction using ERCH systems models program is referred to as an interdisciplinary grand challenge with the requisite interdisciplinarity described as follows. So you learn to use your powers for good, I'm serious. Tell me what good is in semiotics. I would love to know. Try not to kill people. I once heard a very good logician, someone of note, say, look, as far as my work goes, my work will never be used to harm people, but never be used to justify bad acts. So he at least, you may think you may not think his logic is really doing a ton of bad in the world, it may not be doing a ton of good in the world, but at least he was thinking it's not going to be used for bad, at least. So I don't know if we're going to learn to use our powers for good, but maybe it won't be used for evil. So, we'll see. Alright, so this is how it's described. The realization of these goals demands the engagement of diverse interdisciplinary teams of experimental, theoretical, modeling, and computational researchers, including but not limited to biologists, chemists, computer scientists, geoscientists, material scientists, mathematicians, physicists, cyber infrastructure specialists, and social scientists. Well, that's a lot of people. Once again, the absence of humanities is clearly understood. Well, that might be slightly unfair. Some people group philosophy under social science. So, but you're not getting, I don't think they're getting English majors, but yeah. Recognizing that coupled with natural human interactions can, and in the case of climate-related impacts, will raise profound questions of both spatial and temporal justice, for example, distributive justice and intergenerational justice, as well as complex questions of procedural justice, the absence of philosophers is difficult to understand. Now, I think it's very easy to understand. They don't want to deal with those problems. Those are hard problems. However, this omission can be shown to be even more glaring through appreciation of the complex, coupled ethical epistemic issues relevant to the domain of research to be covered by the decadal and regional climate prediction using ERCH systems model programs. Program, including how to frame scientific uncertainty in these contexts as well as decisions regarding how to adequately quantify risk. In many of these domains, epistemic decisions such as decisions regarding how to set up climate impact models, which data to include or exclude, can have important ethical impacts. Now this is a great point. I'm happy the author made it right here. This is real, this is where the rubber hits the road. Even if they don't have hardcore like the philosophers that they're avoiding having, like they just said, the way that they break up the impact models can, even on the procedures model from above, can still be super important. I once went to a Marxist conference mostly to see what they were talking about, and they were talking about just how people when some Marxist some communist government came into power, they relabeled what the previous administration had called public park. And it's oh, you look at the map of the city, it says public park. They relabeled it to slum because that's what it was. There was a ton of people living there, and shanty, it was whatever shacks or shanty town it was. And they labeled it to a slum because they wanted to recognize as good communists where the people were, and so it was no longer a public park that was being overrun by people. It was now, they were redefining the public park as a slum because that's where the people were living. and the people were more important than the way it looked from the outside, according to that government. And so how you break up how you quantify these things are epistemic decisions. What is actually important in these sort of things? So how you frame these things, I mean, granted the uncertainty and risk here is like super philosophically relevant, of course, but like just how you set up how you set up the models and what data to include or exclude is super, like, can become like really fraught, really, with a lot of other issues going on. Okay, let me provide an illustrative example of coupled epistemic ethical issue to underscore the importance of the humanities to interdisciplinary challenges and the huge loss to knowledge that will result from framing the interdisciplinary valued by agencies like the NSF in such a way to exclude the humanities. See, again and again, loss to knowledge. They're not looking at loss to knowledge, they're looking at loss to paychecks. Consider the example of ice sheet models. While recent improvements in ice sheet modeling may be shifting this decision, data on ice sheet dynamics has not been included in models forecasting sea level rise. This decision was made due to scientific consensus on the limitations of ice sheet models. For example, to be able to reliably forecast increase in ice sheet movement or predict dynamical changes in a warming ice sheet, or to adequately reproduce ice streams. A coupled ethical epistemic analysis would render transparent the epistemic decisions regarding reliability and robustness of this data, examine the question of an adequate decision process, including questions regarding adequate for who and for what, for determining whether and what data is sufficiently robust to include in models and how best to do so, and provide resources for better understanding the implications of not including this data into integrated assessment models. For example, the Intergovernmental Plan on Climate Change, IPCC, projections of sea level rise for the 21st century have not so far been included in this data. As a result, the models are overconfident, predicting a significantly lower sea level rise during the century than is warranted, an intrinsic ethical issue, which in turn has an impact on how this aspect of climate science is deployed to inform adaptation policies, such as decisions to build levees or dikes in coastal cities, an extrinsic ethical issue, super expensive public works projects. Coupled ethical epistemological research can thus provide the vehicle for realizing the call for a wider and deeper interdisciplinarity issued a decade ago by Frodman et al., when they argued for new forms of interdisciplinarity to respond to the epistemological and political limits of interdisciplinarity. These two new approaches to interdisciplinarity may conveniently be described as wide and deep. The former would attempt to bridge the sciences and humanities, the latter to involve the non-disciplinary public. In the practice of our NSF-funded research teams have In the practices our National Science Foundation-funded research teams have begun to develop, we are finding that the inclusion of philosophy through the lens of attention to coupled ethical and epistemological questions has not only provided resources for better understanding the values embedded in climate modeling and making transparent the value and limits of climate science for adequately informing climate policy, it has also led us to new and original scientific hypotheses and transformed the questions we ask our disciplines. But this call for a wider and deeper interdisciplinarity will also require new practices to create productive links between the sciences and humanities. From my own experience in developing this research, it will require embedding philosophy within scientific research in such a way as to transform the practice. Is whom like totally dead now? No, I mean, it still gets used. It's just probably not used here. I mean, I still use whom. I mean, my mom has a little sign that says I'm silently correcting your grammar. So, I mean, I usually when I'm speaking, I usually use proper grammar. So I use the whom when I write too. So it's not entirely dead. It depends on exactly it depends on where you're writing, who you're writing for, and what area you're writing in. Like this paper here, this is a paper directed at scientists. I suspect the scientists are not as careful with like the intricacies of grammar. As long as you get the point across, I think they understand. So, but yeah. I was gonna say something else. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, like who exactly or to whom exactly. I mean, the thing about the sea level rise is making a big difference because we've got Miami and Florida is probably going to be underwater in a few years, and that's going to cause problems. But mainly, the people who are going to have real problems are the people in other parts of the world that have nothing to do with the climate change, because it's usually these giant industrialized countries that are pumping the climate change, and they're the ones that are going to be losing their islands, losing their homes, and things like that. So again, these are people who do not have political power, and it's usually the people who do not have political power, and that's why it's not an issue for the people in charge, because those are not the people in power, and that's why it gets pushed to the side. Because people like poor people who aren't citizens of the United States of America, and they're the ones that are dealing with all of our trash in like say like Indonesia or like the islands out in the Atlantic in Asia. They're the ones that have to deal with a lot of our trash, and like it gets swept out there. It's like outside who you're writing for. To whom are you writing for? Yeah. Well, also real time, doing anything in real time is not so easy. Who you're writing for? Whom are you writing for? Shucks. Sue me. Embedded philosophy, fluid practices. Interdisciplinary practices, while sometimes simply resulting from the combination of various disciplinary practices, in other instances has the outcome of transforming the epistemological and methodological practices of the disciplines involved. Many theorists of interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity have debated the proper subjects of these terms, limiting the former to the integration of disciplinary practices and the latter to transformations of disciplinary divides. My purpose is not to debate terms, but to consider how to encourage richer practices of interdisciplinarity, that is, how to encourage new habits that render fluid the practices of those disciplines. My own practice, and what I focus on in this paper, involves the fluidity of practices that interlink philosophy and the sciences through the coupled ethical epistemological analyses. I am not claiming that this is the only vehicle to richer practices of interdisciplinarity, but rather that this is one mode that, while effective, has been too often overlooked in the studies of interdisciplinarity. Even more significant, this is an important and I believe epistemically and ethically essential model of interdisciplinary practice that has not been adequately appreciated by funding agencies. Okay. I just want you to know synesemiotics. Reading very big words at high speed without messing up and also thinking about them is not so easy. So if I make mistakes, I apologize. But I worked hard not to screw this up too bad. The model that the NSF has advanced and supported through grants opportunities is to provide opportunities for scholars to cross disciplinary boundaries. The philosophy behind these opportunities is well reflected in a new funding opportunity to encourage interdisciplinary research in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. Yeah, see, even when they're doing the right thing, they're sticking it in the education area, which again is applied philosophy in some sense. It's how do we change our education practices? And that's applying the other, like the rest of philosophy, to one area. Hey, Bubba Bloop, what's up? I'm reading a paper on interdisciplinary, trying to get philosophers in different areas. Yeah, if you want to grab the paper, you can get at this link. You just click on the Google Scholar link and it shows up there. So, yeah. So, the NSF's FIRE program, fostering interdisciplinary research on education, arises from the NSF. Yeah, and feel free to ask questions or whatever you want. Just trying to get through this interesting area where they're saying what the National Science Foundation is up to. The National Science Foundation's FIRE program, fostering interdisciplinary research on education, arises from the NSF conviction that there are a number of complex problems facing the nation that can only be solved through interdisciplinary research that catalyzes new approaches. Theories, methodologies, analytic techniques, and findings robustly understood in one field can have a catalytic effect when brought into contact with those of another. Moreover, interdisciplinary endeavors also increase the human capacity of the nation to address difficult problems. While philosophy should be playing a key role in such efforts, NSF calls for interdisciplinary research for complex problems do not include philosophy. And yet, my own experience in developing coupled ethical epistemological analyses has demonstrated that this type of work is best accomplished in the context of research collaborations with scientists and engineers. Oh, thank you, Synestemiotics. See, now you've gotten nice again. Oh, your burps. Okay. It is only in this context that philosophers deeply embedded in research teams can begin to partner with scientists and engineers to render transparent the types of value decisions that are entrenched in research models and methods and identify the ethical implications of research decisions, as well as begin to examine the questions that are ignored, under-examined, and rendered invisible through the scientific habit or lack of interest. All right. This is just reminded me of something. There's been a bunch of discussion recently with the pandemic with how to actually do what we need to do nowadays, where we only have so many resources and we have people literally dying in hospitals like all over the country. And how do we make decisions about who gets what? Do we try to save a bunch of old people that are going to be sick anyway and might not live? Do we send all that stuff trying to save someone else? It's incredibly difficult decisions. And how do we do that? So this question right here is I read a paper a little while ago on the problems that they're having in the context of hospitals and how we need to have ethicists embedded within hospitals, because in the day-to-day run, trying to just save people in this pandemic, this has become incredibly terribly relevant and bad. Just every day this is happening. So it's not even this we need to do this in the abstract. No, we need to do this now every day, and hospitals are dealing with this problem. Have you heard of the unique model called pandemic mode, in which there is a special triage that privileges those who are healthier overall over those who are sick, which is counter to normal triage? Yeah, that's exactly what I think that they were talking about. I mean, I don't know the details about any of this, but that's exactly what they were worried about, is who makes what decisions, on what basis do we basically say some people are going to die, who gets to choose who gets to die and who gets to live. And so this is the issue, is how do you actually make the decision on who gets to live and die without actually being embedded in the work? And so this sort of engineering problem has all these value stuff, where do hospital resources go? Where do medical technology resources go? How does that happen? And yeah, so this is just become a bit of a much more pressing issue. The lacuna in the funding profile of the NSF is yet another institutional barrier that must be removed. The paths to doing this are already in place in the NSF. One is the NSF's twofold commitment, on the one hand to interdisciplinary research in the sciences, and on the other hand to funding ethics research in the sciences and engineering through programs like Ethics Education and Science and Engineering. Unfortunately, the NSF has not appreciated the ways in which these two commitments can mutually inform one another. However, the NSF's commitment to the broader impacts criterion may provide a solution to this divide. The Übermensch, go back to the Nietzsche. I don't think we should let Nietzsche decide anything, to tell you the truth, at this point. The NSF currently employs two criteria to assess grant applications. The The first of these focuses on the intellectual merit of the proposed project and research capabilities and capacities of the investigators. The second criterion requires consideration of the broader social impacts of the research. These two criterion are designed to assist the NSF balance excellence in scientific and engineering research with the broader impacts of that research. 1. Upon the educational and research infrastructure. 2. As it leads to a more diverse and globally oriented group of scientists and engineers, as well as 3. Supporting projects with positive social impact. Since the broader impacts criterion already requires that scientists and engineers be attentive to connections between their discoveries and their use in service to society, there is already a commitment to being attentive to extrinsic ethical concerns and to issues of justice through questions of what constitutes benefit to society, as well as who is impacted both positively and negatively by discoveries, as well as what interests are ignored or rendered invisible. I fear this is putting words in the NSF's mouth. Like, yes, this is actually completely the case that we have to consider all these things, but what this sort of connections between their discoveries and their use in service to society, remember who they think society is to serve. Is it really all these other people, or is it some of the people that are kind of in power now? What is the service to society? Who counts in society? That's where that's where the rub is. That's the problem. The broader impacts criterion thus provides one justification for a robust inclusion of philosophical perspectives. This justification lends support to my argument that a fully interdisciplinary approach in the sciences and engineering requires the type of attention to coupled ethical epistemic issues that will be aided by the inclusion of philosophers on research teams. Furthermore, many scientists and engineers are well aware of the ethical dimensions of their work. In the field of climate science, it is clear to scientists that the knowledge that they produce concerning geophysical dynamics and the impacts of climate change on social and physical systems has clear links both to policy as well as to issues of justice and equality. Just one example, Mann and Kump, in their guide to the findings of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Dire Predictions, Understanding Climate Change, include a section on the ethics of climate change. As they note, the international media has paid considerable attention to the economic implications of global climate change. They have, by contrast, paid little attention to the equally important ethical considerations. Well, equally important to who? Some things are more equal than others, especially to people with a lot of money. They note as well that policy agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol's commitment to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system itself raises ethical questions concerning what counts as dangerous interference and for whom and for what. And there we go. For whom? In other words, it raises questions of distributive and intergenerational justice, questions of moral worth. Do we have an obligation to protect species or ecosystems, as well as complex issues of responsibility for harms and duties to protect? However, ethical issues, such as those noted by Mann and Kump, are not simply additions to the scientific research to be added as a task for philosophers to sort out while the scientists work out the geophysical models. As I am arguing in this essay, we will have better science both in the traditional sense of advancing knowledge by building on and adding to our current knowledge, as well as in the broader sense of science for the good of, namely scientific research that, in terms of the NSF broader impacts criterion, better benefits society through embedding philosophy into the practices of science to help ensure attention to coupled ethical epistemic issues in interdisciplinary research. I mean, how much do you guys want to bet that this impacts criterion has been removed from the NSF in the last few years? Okay, actually a little bit long paper, but we're getting there. Coupling science and the philosophy through coupled ethical epistemic analyses. The example of geoengineering. I was saying on my buddy Aristotle's stream, who's another philosophy streamer. You gotta go send some yaks out. Those links to those. Yeah, I'll take a look after the stream's over. May the force of meme jockeying be with me. Thank you. What was I just saying about Aristotle stream? He's another philosophy streamer. One of the very few of us. But yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. All right, but have a great night, Semiotics. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Hope you are enjoying the paper. To accomplish the goal of ensuring attention to coupled ethical epistemic issues in interdisciplinary research in the sciences has, for the interdisciplinary research teams for which I am a part, required embedding philosophy into the practices of sciences. This has meant a relatively long, and in this case, 6 years commitment to working together. In my experience, there is often a period of 1 to 2 years needed to learn common vocabulary, appreciation of methods, and so on in order to be able to work together on coupled epistemic ethical analyses. So, I mean, this is basically a master's program. You have to get a master's in the other thing. Like, you can do 2 years of working together. Once possibilities become clear, then research trajectories can be formulated, grant proposals to bring in funding can be written, and the research team can be constituted to ensure the expertise needed to support all necessary elements of the project. This is not a different trajectory than most interdisciplinary research in the sciences. The difference is the explicit inclusion of the methods of the humanities into the research team, in this case of philosophy. This brings with it additional challenges, for while some scientists have the training to bridge their science and relevant social sciences, very few have the training needed to bridge their science and the relevant disciplines in the humanities. Indeed, I suspect many scientists would simply be puzzled by the very suggestion that the humanities have important resources to put into dialogue with the sciences through interdisciplinary research. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised, but that's the whole thing. I mean, people don't know what they don't know. That's part of the issue here. And so when you make suggestions that like this, they're not going to be understood, because the whole point is that people have become specialized, and when they get specialized, they don't understand other people's specialization. That is what it is to be specialized. And so, I mean, that's why you write stuff and like people don't understand, because once you know a lot more about a topic, then you can't just assume, well, other people just won't understand. So this is back to the institutional breakdowns we were discussing at the beginning of this paper. By embedding the practices of philosophy into a relatively mature climate science research team, that is, one that already had a certain level of facility with collaborative research through our practices of working together on various projects, we've begun to render fluid the disciplinary logics we had become habituated to, and have begun to develop different practices. These have produced exciting new knowledges. In this way, our work has become unbounded and indeed undisciplined, in the sense of neither trying to bring together different disciplines nor transforming our disciplines, but rather practicing new ways of thinking together that aim at new knowledges, including rendering transparent what has been overlooked by past practices or make unknowable by disciplined practices, as well as argued by Bayer and Arnold in their article Becoming Undisciplined. We must identify and account for the choices we make about what we think is best, what we think is and is not worth including in our work, and equally our choices about how best to approach that which we include. Oh yeah, I mean, I was chatting with Semiotics, but any of the other viewers, feel free to chime in, let me know if you have any opinions on this, questions, or whatnot. Space does not permit providing a comprehensive example of how attention to coupled ethical epistemic issues can transform scientific and philosophical practices, but the following analysis of climate geoengineering will serve as an illustration. I will offer a flavor of our recent work. For a more complete account, I refer readers to our essay Towards Integrated Ethical and Scientific Analysis of Geoengineering, a Research Agenda. In this essay, we provide the latest result from research by our climate modeling team on proposals to geoengineer the climate. In the past decade, scientific and engineering proposals to deliberately modify the climate through solar radiation management have burgeoned, fueled at least in part by worries about threshold climate events and belief in the ineffectiveness of political efforts to mitigate greenhouse gases. Some have concluded that geoengineering may be the only human response that can fend off rapid and high consequence climate impacts. While geoengineering proposals are typically designed to be coupled, at least ideally, with robust mitigation efforts, nonetheless there is a growing movement in support of at least research and field testing of geoengineering strategy as a form of insurance against climate catastrophes. Well, I mean, we did have a suggestion we should have a set off bombs in the atmosphere to like divert hurricanes. So someone's on top of it. I'm sorry. One such form of geoengineering involves increasing Earth's albedo by deploying sulfate aerosol in the stratosphere or by increasing cloud cover in order to change the Earth's albedo in such a way as to scatter and reflect sunlight, with the ultimate goal of cooling the planet. So now we're going to go into nuclear winter scenarios. That's awesome. Those studying this form of geoengineering are well aware that it can have potentially harmful impacts, such as changing regional precipitation and evaporation patterns around the world. And since there will likely be regional variations where some regions may receive overall benefits, while others may not benefit and may even suffer greater harm, issues of distributive justice are clearly raised. For example, Rick et al., for example, argues that the relative appeal of different levels of solar radiation management depends on the region considered and the variable temperature or precipitation that is deemed most important. These and other potentially harmful impacts of SRM with aerosol injection have resulted in a general appreciation of the fact that research on and potential deployment of geoengineering raises important ethical issues. Morgan and Rick, for example, note that social, behavior, legal, and ethical issues will be important in many cases of solar radiation management research, and Cruson states that scientific, legal, ethical, and societal issues regarding the climate modification scheme are many. I do just want to make a claim that I have a friend who's in one of these climate science businesses. He models weather. And there's a lot of things that there's military benefits to this. There's societal benefits to this. Where is going to be the safest place to go? What's the safest route based on the climate changing over time? Where trade routes and securing military routes. All this sort of stuff needs to be known. And so the idea of actually blowing up bombs to change things is not super crazy. It's moronic, but it could be done. It'd just be absolute last resort, because it's just so terrible. You can't predict any of this stuff with any certainty, but yeah, you could actually blow up bombs to try to put aerosols in the air and stuff. It's just, I hope we don't have to get there. It's looking that we might though. Alright, continuing. In response, many studies supporting solar radiation management research have stressed the need for international governments of such research. While important, these proposals are often lacking a fully developed account of the ethical and justice issues that should motivate the policy needs. Yeah, because you're affecting everyone, not just you yourselves when you do stuff like this. While it is important to develop this analysis, our team was considered instead with the fact that almost all the studies on solar radiation management remain silent on the ethical issues surrounding this research. We argue that ethically significant decisions are often embedded in the scientific analysis itself, as well as in how scientific models represent impacts and vulnerabilities. Our goals, then, in our recent paper and the aims of our current research are 1. To delineate the complex coupling of scientific and ethical issues involved in solar radiation management research, namely computer modeling and natural event analysis, and pre-deployment for testing, as well as the ethical issues to be addressed prior to and during deployment for geoengineering, and 2. To provide a research agenda for coupled ethical and scientific research in the area of SRM. Yeah, how would you possibly know if you're going to model complex dynamic systems like the weather and where who's going to get more rain, who's going to get more less rain, sun, not sun, all sorts of things. It's going to be what people's it's just incredibly difficult to even understand who would be affected by all of this. Alright, continuing. What our research practices have made clear is that the value of philosophical practices in general and ethical analysis in particular is not simply as a vehicle for making judgments once the scientific and social scientific analysis is completed. On the contrary, our integrated practices create fluidity in our disciplined methods and expectations and open opportunities for our new knowledge production. Our research team has, in practicing new ways of thinking together, come to appreciate the importance of new domains of research that are not typically addressed in natural and social science assessments. As we explained in the paper, whether a particular geoengineering proposal satisfies the requirements of inter- and or intragenerational justice can hinge on geophysical factors involving 1. Very long timescales, centuries to millennia, 2. Differences in regional impacts, and 3. Potential low probability, high probability events. These events are, thus far, quite poorly represented in the current generation of Earth system models. Hence, the coupled ethical epistemic analysis point to open and decision-relevant research questions in the natural and social sciences. In our work, we identified 9 key fields of coupled epistemic ethical analyses relevant to solar radiation management. Namely, 1. Whether SRM, solar radiation management, can in fact be tested. 2. What are the coupled scientific ethical issues related to solar radiation management pre-deployment for testing? Are there political risks for conducting SRM research? What are feasible climate trajectories? How do we value different climate trajectories? What knowledge institutions and decision processes are needed for responsible decision making? What are the distributions of benefits and harms along the trajectories for what entities? Who will those harmed be compensated? How fast, if at all, could we learn? How is geoengineering to be controlled? This is seemingly more and more like a one of these movies starts off with, we thought we were saving the Earth, but instead we created a portal to another dimension, and now we've got monsters coming through. While this limited overview of our research cannot hope to be adequate to the complexity of our work, to illustrate it a bit more fully, let me provide more information about our work on the first 2 of these fields. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Bubble Bloop, we just, to do anything properly takes forever, and we're just running out of time, I fear. Regarding the question as to whether solar radiation management can in fact be tested, actually, yeah, what was that? Cloverfield. I think that was the basis for Cloverfield. There were people doing science, and they got themselves a kaiju. Regarding the question as to whether solar radiation management can in fact, or was that Pacific Rim? Maybe it was both, I don't know. Kaiju, either way. Regarding the question as to whether solar radiation management can in fact be tested, what we label a meta-theoretical question, we argue that natural experiments, volcanic eruptions, and proposed small-scale field studies involving partial deployment may not be sufficient for inferring system response at the global level. Nonlinear internal feedbacks can lead to bifurcations of the climate system, where for small forcing, the climate remains stable, but as the forcing increases, the climate system can reach a critical threshold where it transitions to unstable conditions. Given this, knowledge regarding such nonlinear feedbacks may not be testable. In addition, we demonstrate that delayed system response to forcing may also not be testable, and that ocean and atmosphere response time to external forcing such as SRM is fundamentally different. Hence, finding from regional deployment will not apply to full-scale deployment due to differences in the temporal response time between spatial scales, leading to concerns about the viability of field tests to determine safety of SRM deployment. As I think Cinesemiotics was saying earlier, there are a lot of stories built into this research, all the sort of all these sort of connections between where science and ethics can go connect up and also go wrong. There's a lot of good stories you could write up, fiction stories about near future that could be given, alternate futures about how things go could go right, could go wrong. There's been a comment if you remember. There's been a rash of movies where the world ends or something, or bad things happen, and what was it, 2012 or something, apocalypse movies. I mean, people love apocalypse movies, but all of this could be fodder for that. Continuing. Given these conclusions, namely that we may not know with confidence how the planetary system will respond, maybe we should just blow up the moon. I think that's the best solution, given the planetary system. Planetary system will respond to solar radiation management until full deployment, and perhaps long after deployment has ended. And that's also the Matrix, where they blacked out the sun. This led to the identification of a series of coupled ethical scientific research questions relevant to the solar radiation management pre-deployment for testing. In this domain, we identified a series of coupled research issues, including... Okay, now we've just got dots. Bullet point 1. What can be inferred from the limited scale experiments about the potential of full-scale experiment, and what cannot? Will this knowledge be adequate for making a responsible decision? Will this knowledge be sufficient to warrant the risks of field testing? Bubble says, since the dawn of time, man has dreamed of destroying the sun. Well, I'm trying to blow up the moon, not the sun. I think that's the best plan of action. Blow up the moon, all the other problems go away. Maybe more ways than one. Is it possible to estimate large-scale system response from a small-scale field test? What side effects will result from pre-deployment, and can they be predicted? What are the costs of side effects of field testing? What are the bounds of permissible field testing in terms of spatial and temporal extent, as well as the degree of environmental modification and intrusion? Are there field tests, that is, specifically SRM pre-deployment for testing, that would incur only modest risk of significant side effects? What level of confidence would ethically adequate to conduct such tests? What can be learned from such tests? What scientific and ethical knowledge is required to responsibly decide whether to start SRM field testing? What is the basis for deciding on acceptable risk levels for field testing? What level of learning would justify risks of side effects? This one right here. This is going to be the one, because this is going to be the ratio of pain that we see coming down the road with the risks level of field testing. As soon as the risk level of field testing drops below the risk level of what we think is coming, then it's going to happen. That's basically what I think is going to be the case. What measures of impacts would be used to determine that the costs of field testing are higher than the benefits of field testing and should be halted? Same thing here. Once the cost of climate change is getting really bad, then the cost of the testing doesn't seem so bad. What is the boundary between field testing and deployment? Will some regions be more harmed by SRM field testing than others? Will those nations, regions, individuals harmed by SRM field testing and or deployment for geoengineering be compensated? Joke. Who will be responsible for potentially required compensation, and how will compensation be determined? The general conclusion of our coupled scientific ethical analysis of solar radiation management strategies led us to the general conclusion that 1. This type of research practice, with its attention to coupled ethical epistemic analyses, is an essential element of improving research in this area of science, and 2. That given the importance and value of this type of research, funding agencies should modify funding mechanisms to encourage and support these types of coupled research practices. Alright, conclusion. Widening and deepening interdisciplinary practices in science and engineering through inclusion of the methods and practices of the humanities has the potential for better achieving the aims of agencies like the NSF who are supporting such research. However, much needs to be accomplished to move from our current practices to the approaches I propose here. In this paper, I outline a series of institutional, disciplinary, and epistemic barriers that require attention to achieve the types of practices I detail in this essay. Although arguably all are important, most salient in my judgment for successfully embedding the practices of philosophy within the practice of science is a commitment to transformations of training practices that we see in efforts like the NSF Integrative Graduate Education and Research Traineeship program, but with an emphasis on programs that integrate the humanities with the sciences and engineering, as well as a corresponding appreciation of the importance of the practices of the humanities in general to interdisciplinary research in the sciences. Only then will we achieve the vision of a wide and deep interdisciplinarity that will result in truly good science. Yeah, well, I mean, this is a very impressive paper. It's very well done. There were a few typos aside. I mean, they had a picture in the paper. I like that. But yeah, so basically, let me make a few meta comments. Do I know a whole lot about this? Not really. I'm just like try to stay somewhat informed about. I mean, just like climate science because it seems like it's a bad problem nowadays, and but do I really know the details of interdisciplinary research? Not at all. And so I have read some philosophy of education papers in the last few months, and they're arguing it's actually a very similar sort of argument they're trying to make because they're trying to change how we are changing the educational institutions to basically do better by the future. And so this is sort of a very parallel argument. How do we change the science institutions that we have here in the United States and possibly the world to be better over the long run? So I don't know a ton about these things specifically, but the kind of argumentation that goes on in this, how do you argue for this sort of thing? Well, you have to really show that there's a problem here. And the problem is the way the institutions are set up is that, well, you're saying we're not doing good science right now. That's kind of what the argument just was here. We're not doing good science right now. Are you crazy? Of course we're doing good science. You're going to get response. You have to show in some sense that you're going to get better science if you integrate as the author is arguing for. Now, they very impressive sort of stuff because they have done the work themselves. They put that like 2 years of learning how to talk to another discipline. They put another 4 years into doing the research, and so it's sort of impressive. But like, how do you actually do that? Well, you have to get like very tangible results to show, look, you're going to get better science, you're going to get better funding. How are you going to do that? You have to show that you're going to get funding. So this is kind of where we're going here. How do you actually get the funding to do better science? And so this is sort of get back to this picture. This is kind of the crux of the argument. This is where we're at right now. These two sides, the intrinsic and the extrinsic, are sort of the they're looked at a little bit, but mostly lip service. And so there has to be shown that there's really good work to be done here that will provide not just good science, but good research opportunities. And that's kind of what the needs to be developed. And so if you can show that, and I think the author did an okay job, but I would have liked a little bit more of how to get from here to here or here to here, the exact routes to do this. And that's not so easy to show in some sort of argument form anyway. But like, this is a very impressive paper because they did lay out sort of like the different areas of how this goes. Now, they said this deeper and wider stuff. Yeah, these metaphors of deeper and wider is sort of shaky. I mean, well, they're not very specific, not shaky. They're just not very specific. How do you actually do this stuff? Of course, the devil's always in the details. Okay, so those are my comments on like sort of the structure of the paper. What the issue is and where the argument, how it was structured, is to show, look, you can do it, and these are the areas that you can move the current practices to, so that there's like a way to go. Now the question is, how did they do that? Well, they gave a case example of their own sort of research into this stuff, and that's a good strategy to show that it can be done, and here's how to do it. Now, I'm a philosopher. Am I going to be impressed by this if I'm someone at the NSF? I don't know. I don't know how what those folks are looking at, because I mean, it's those people are, I don't know their backgrounds. I figure the people at the National Science Foundation are going to be scientists and people who are interested in science, and so convincing those folks that they need humanities to do better science, again, like I said, that's a tough sell. And so you have to sort of over engineer your response to them. You have to over deliver. So Now, has that, how does this conclusion do that? Maybe. I don't know. Would they be impressed with this sort of list of interesting questions that definitely could provide research opportunities? All this stuff could do that. So maybe they would be impressed. I don't know. But that's how this paper is structured. It kind of shows the problem and then tries to make the point by showing that you get some really good, interesting questions out of it. All right. Does chat have anything they want to ask about this? Because I think that's basically all I have to say. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen with all this stuff right now because we're in this pandemic. We need to have philosophers integrated, as I mentioned earlier, because of the problems just with medical technology and medical engineering, and how does that actually get those decisions get made in terms of ethics and just getting stuff done. So this is sort of getting to be a sadly relevant paper in just current times, but it's gonna, what I fear we need more of the interdisciplinarity, as the author says. Will we be able to get there in time, or is it always going to be after the fact? We'll always be playing catch up. We're going to need some sort of new way of going about the stuff. And I mean, that wasn't the goal of this paper. I mean, it was just showing that this is how it's done. But yeah. Okay. That's all I have to say about this. As always, blow up the moon. That's the number one solution to all the problems. Everyone stay safe out there and have a great night. And I think that'll be it for now. What time is it? Yeah. I'm going to stop. I'm going to cut the stream. So have a great night, anyone. And I will be back soon. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, Aristotle, thanks for watching. Have a great night. Good stream yesterday. Bye, Bloop.